We are not so great, Britain.
Chapter 10. So long and thanks for the fish and chips.
Hello, I'm Elisa from Florence, and here with me is Tomasz from Finland.
Hello.
And we are here for the wrap up episode of You're Not So Great Britain. So, how do you feel about that, Tomasz?
I feel it's about time to finish because, we can pick a number of more things that we would like to see improved in Britain, but I don't think this is the point. We don't want to turn it into like never ending rant about how Britain is crap. We just wanted to give some pointers and to maybe hopefully get people thinking about if their perception of their country is really right, and just to give them some starting point for new mental escapades into approaching the new way to understand their own country.
Yeah. And we also have a special guest with us today. You want to say hi, Adam?
Hello.
Hi.
Adam is my British boyfriend that's been mentioned several times in the podcast. And he
And
agreed to sit with us today to give his point of view on this subject.
so, Adam, if you can tell us, do you think we are right in our like major point that Britons lack perspective from the outside, lack comparisons to other countries, and this is why they have biased view of their own country?
Whether or not a lack of view on outside countries would be a limiting factor. I mean, it could be a limiting factor, but it may not be the sole source.
I got this feeling when I look at Britain that there's this notion of like British exceptionalism, that you don't even try to compare with other countries because Britain is special, Britain is great, Britain is the only one of its kind. Am I right having that feeling, or it's too far fetched?
I mean, there's definitely an aspect of Britain is great. I mean, sure, I can't disagree with that. Generally speaking, not being beaten down as a country in quite a long time probably would help with that. I remember with the story of what was it? The song behind Rule Britannia with Britannia Rules the Seas. I think it was after Trafalgar with the Armada. We ended up winning that one, and it terrified all other nations for at least 100 years. So much so that when we finally got into the next fight on the sea, we were completely destroyed because we were horribly out of practice. So,
And just too sure of its own greatness. Yeah.
yeah. So, Britain being sure of its own greatness and other countries being sure of its greatness until eventually, after, long enough, that is tested and things go horribly wrong. So arrogance can be a very bad thing.
I hope you forgive me the comparison, but when you were talking about that, Russia came to mind. That
Yeah.
Russia has invaded Ukraine, and they were thinking like, we are so great, we will crush them in 3 days, and everyone else was really surprised to see that Ukraine is actually able to kick Russian arses and push them out of the most of the countries so far. And this is the situation when the great empire believes in its own greatness so much that they failed to notice that the things were in fact crumbling for several years and they are not up to the job again. And when you spoke about this situation with the great British Armada, like riding of the on the opinion of being the greatest and then being badly beaten because they did nothing to improve it, they were just comfortable with like the notion of being the greatest and the best. That reminds me of Russia, but it's also, I think you are bang on the point we are trying to make, that Britain needs to sit down and re-evaluate itself to see if it's really still so great, because maybe some things are not as good as they used to be.
Yeah, also, just cutting in to add that if you think about V-Day and the fact that the UK was the country that stood up to the Nazis in the latest World War. And so they came off looking as the good guys, while, after all, what they did with their colonial empires was really terrible, but nobody really remembers that. So maybe that's why they came away feeling like we are the good guys, we are the winners, we are the best. And yeah, I think that might also factor in this whole feeling of being, blindly convinced of their own greatness, even when real life shows them that, they're not the greatest country, they're not exceptional, they're just another country with its problems and its shortcomings, like everyone else, pretty much.
Yeah. What do you think, Adam?
I mean, yeah, I think arrogance can blind you to your own flaws. To quote Scrubs, I think it is. There's an episode where Turk is feeling a little chubby and going to the gym, and Dr. Cox ends up saying, "Do you like yourself? Do you love yourself?" And if the answer is ever yes, you have lost the game. You are no longer doing it. It is game over. Or paraphrasing the quote, at least. I think there's definitely an aspect of whether it's a country level, a personal level, organizational level. You can see it with Google recently and how terrified they are of ChatGPT. Arrogance and comfort can lead to not quite realizing why you're letting things slide.
Yeah, I think Google already learned one lesson when they tried to create their own social media platform, the Google Plus.
Yeah.
They were thinking, oh, we are so great, we will just smash Facebook to pieces, and it ended really badly for them. So yeah, that's a good another example. But I think there is one thing that it's great in Britain, and this is like, well, maybe not recently because they are really struggling to convince everyone they are doing great after Brexit, but in general, Britain has a great PR. It's partly thanks to this like colonial past, because even though those many countries become independent, they are still influenced by the British culture and the British educational system. But like when Elisa, you mentioned the war, this is something that really drives some Poles mad when we hear like Britain was the only country standing up to Hitler. And if you remember all these Polish pilots in Battle of Britain, without whom even Churchill said it would be impossible. If we remember who broke the Enigma code, if we remember all these people from all of Europe and beyond joining the ranks of British forces, and Americans supplying them with supplies and weaponry and steel and everything, then it's not really that Britain was alone in it. And this is something that Britain manages to stay on the top. Like there's this one example that always it's one of my pet peeves about Britain. Like when you drive through Helensburgh in Scotland, and there's a sign saying like a birthplace of John Logie Baird, inventor of television. But actually, if you look into the British Patent Office to see who has a patent for mechanical television, it's one guy called Jan Szczepanik who invented that 20 years before John Logie Baird brought it to the market. So, if you have this power, if you speak English, if you get this good PR, you can convince the world everything about you, and other countries has no chance to stand up to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also that maybe due to its insular situation, Britain lacks the perspective that other European countries might have, because it's by nature more isolated, historically, and by nature more isolated. I think I might be wrong, but that's the feeling I have compared to, I don't know, countries of Central Europe that have always been more of a more interconnected, maybe, and there's been more exchange, also more merging. So I think that that's what may also partially makes up for this.
I think you're right. And also, as you mentioned, Eastern Central Europe, there's also something in their history that Britain never really experienced, that whenever like big powers are fighting, we become the battlefield. Like Napoleon runs to the east and Stalin runs to the west, and
Mm.
it just there was even some silly movie on YouTube, History of Poland, and it was this Polish guy sitting in the field, getting up, and some soldiers running over him. He was like trying to get up, like brushing the dirt off his clothes, and then soldiers running on the other side, and that was the whole history of Poland. Just this repeated thing, and Britain being an island, unless you actually wanted to invade Britain, you were usually like left outside. Like the Great War, the Second World War was happening on
Mhm.
the continent, and
Yeah.
the outlying islands were not so involved in that. And as we go further back into the history, you will probably also notice that it helped to dominate the seas, because if you are an island and you are not bothered with all these struggles that are going on the continent, you have time to explore the world. That's why the other biggest colonial powers were Portugal and Spain, because they are also on the peninsula, so they are not so involved in European politics.
Mm.
But that was the history, and I just wanted to ask Adam one more question. Adam, after you moved to Florence, did your perspective on your home country has changed after learning how things are done in Italy?
I can see there are differences, of course. Bureaucracy here is on another level. But then I don't know
So
if
I
that's
heard.
just because I happen to now be a foreigner in a foreign country, so I have to deal with
Mm.
more
Yeah,
bureaucracy.
well, okay, Italian bureaucracy is hell for everybody, including Italians. But as we were discussing about this earlier, Adam and I, and he was saying, and I agree that Italian bureaucracy is hell, but people who are supposed to help you with that, because they know it's hell, it's stupidly complicated, doesn't make sense. They will go out of their way to try and help you. Like you go to an appointment for some bureaucratic thing, and you realize you don't have you don't have document you needed or a signature, and the person at the counter most of the time will be like, oh, you should have brought this. Well, let's see what we can do. And they do some, I don't know, print something on the spot, or they make some calls and they try to find a solution. So at least they try to make up for that.
Yeah, that's exactly my own experience with Finland as well.
Mm.
Bureaucracy here is crazy as well, but everyone is trying to help you and explain it to you, and everyone is patient. And it's the opposite to Britain, when in theory bureaucracy is very simple, but whenever something's get wrong, you have to deal with this like terrible call centers when you are reached and connected to the people who have not a clue about what they are doing, unless it's in the script, and they are not at all interested in helping you in most cases. And yeah, I don't know what's worse, but for me, I think if I think about that, I'd rather be in Finland when it's crap, but people are trying to help you, than in Britain when it's simple, but if something's going wrong, you are on your own fighting the brainless automatic system sending you some threatening letters all the time.
Mm.
Well, we had a chapter on that, so
Yeah.
we invite everyone to go back and listen if they haven't yet.
And what else, Adam?
Well, so this previous topic, briefly, I'm remembering the horror of applying for a new passport. Um, that one took me half a year.
This was the English side, though. The
Yes,
English, yeah.
that's the English side.
Yeah, I think Elisa, you were telling
Yeah,
about that in
yeah,
one of the
actually mentioned
podcasts. Yeah,
that in a previous episode.
It impresses me how the post office seems to have a monopoly on bureaucracy. Everything goes through the post office. Food, simultaneously better and worse, because, well,
because they have no beans on toast.
Italian food is very good. It has its reputation. It lives up to it. But because being in Italy and Italian food, it has a monopoly, so you deal with less variation. Be harder to find other things. I found. I prefer the trains here. They actually seem to be relatively reasonably priced, maybe compared to the UK, slash actually get you there in a quick time.
I never would have thought I would hear an Englishman appreciate Italian trains. But anyway, carry on.
I'm trying to think at this point. How far is Rome from here?
Wait, sorry, I'm just going to check exactly how far Rome is from Florence.
I'm on it already. Yeah.
Okay.
It's 1 hour 26 minutes on train,
Ah, but I need it in
and it's
distance.
273 kilometers.
Okay, so 273 kilometers, the equivalent of that in the UK. How far from Cambridge to Birmingham? Because I remember that stretch used to be awful.
It's 100 miles, so it's 160, and it also takes you on the train, according to Google.
3 hours.
It will take you 3 hours and 19 minutes,
Yep. So
or 2 hours 53 minutes if you want to have 4 changes on the way.
I guess one of those would have been through London.
All of them actually that Google proposes to me now are through London.
One thing that I do appreciate is the high-speed trains here. As having lived in Cambridge and being from the border of Wales, it does take, or did take, 5 hours to get from the east side to the west side, and it just seems to work better here. I can travel around, it seems a bit more easily. Though I only tend to go north to south, so I don't know if what happens if I try to go east.
I think it wouldn't be too bad, to be honest, because I have traveled east and it's not that bad.
Yeah, I can check that too. Save, I don't know, Florence to Ancona, 278 kilometers, 3 hours in train. You need to go through Bologna.
Yeah, maybe that's because it's more, Florence to Rome is more direct, I guess. But yeah, I used to
I think
travel.
there's the mountain ridge in the middle. That's
Mm,
probably why.
true, yeah. But yeah, I used to travel because I used to study in Trieste, which is northeastern side of Italy, and it did take a long time, but there was a direct connection, so it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was definitely quicker than it would have been if I had to cover a similar distance in the UK.
Yeah, their train is every 90 minutes. It takes over 4 hours, and it's direct train from Florence, and it's 400 kilometers. So your average is about 100 kilometers per hour on this route on the train.
Yeah, I do find the trains a bit more pleasant here as well. Generally tend to be newer too.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had a podcast about the public transport as well, and we looked into that. I think the privatization of the trains was bad. Anyway, so I hope you will enjoy your time in Italy, Adam, and don't be cross with us. We don't think that Britain is all bad. We just think it's not as great as some people trying to tell us. So we are just trying to help. I hope you still like Elisa after 10 chapters of our podcast.
Do you? Do you?
Do I still like you?
I think so.
This is going to be recorded though. I'm not sure I want it on the record whether I still like you.
Okay.
You may hold it against me in a court of law or something.
I see. Okay. Jury's out. Jury's out.
Meanwhile, Elisa, I think it's time to finish our podcast as we said in the introduction, because basically we don't want to smash poor Adam with our criticism of his country. But there were some topics we're considering for making a chapters about them.
Hmm.
One of them, I think, is the only one I really regret we haven't had a chance to cover, is this classism in British society.
Yeah.
When there's very little social mobility between like working class and the middle class, not to mention the upper class of all these people that are in fact in power in this country. But apart from that, I think we covered the most important issues with Britain, and we just hope, of course, not thanks to our podcast, but in general, this just needs to be addressed. So I hope that Britain will be able to do so.
Yeah, it's a
But
conversation that needs to be had.
and we are happy to help, but we are not really in position to do any more than just pointing fingers at some things, because
Yeah.
it's for the British people to do their own work and to fix their own country. But there is also one thing I believe should be addressed first, and I just don't understand how, like, all the political class, maybe apart from the Scottish politics, it's like this giant elephant in the room taking a giant dump on the table, and yet everyone is trying so hard to not mention that this may be a reason of many of the problems, and I'm sure you already know what I'm trying to tell here.
I'm pretty sure it's about Brexit.
It is about Brexit. This not helps Britain in fixing the problems it already had
Not at
before,
all.
and I believe somehow sorting it out, like not even join back the European Union, but even like try to make it work somehow. I'm now telling stuff like if I was a Labour leader or something, but the fact is it's not working. And until Britain admits Brexit is not working, I don't think anything else can be done about anything else.
Yeah. Problem is if and when they're going to admit that. I mean, those who were against Brexit in the first place, they've always said it's not going to work. And I've seen here and there some people admitting I was duped. I voted to leave, but I think it was actually a bad idea. I made a mistake. But it's not many people. I mean, in general, it's never easy to admit one's own mistakes. But yeah, I think the thing that worries me the most about the UK and Brexit is the number of people who simply don't care. Those who, don't really have a stance. They might say, yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but they kind of just shrug it off and move on like it doesn't really concern them.
I think that may be a part of this British mentality when you just go along with the things as they are.
Mm.
I remember once I was renting a flat and we had this really nice landlord ladies, two sisters, and we were sitting at the tea with them in our kitchen. And me and my then Polish girlfriend, we were complaining about how stupid these two separate taps are in our kitchen sink and in our bathroom. And they said, yeah, it's always drives us crazy. How ridiculous is that? Like, if we go for holidays, it's always so good. And then they were changing our taps and they put the old ones again. And we were like, we just spoke about that, like how ridiculous it is. Why you just haven't put the proper mixer tapes? And they were like, oh no, I know it's crap, but it was always like that.
Yeah,
And that was the end of the topic.
yeah.
So I hope this will not be the case here, because honestly speaking, Britain was not always like that. It used to be really great, and I do believe it can be great again if only a proper diagnosis will be made and some
Mm.
actual work on improvement the matters as they are now will be done. It can be great again.
Yeah, I see. I mean, I don't know if it's a sign of things changing. I hope it is, but the fact that there have been so many strikes lately, it strikes me. Sorry for the play word, but it strikes me as something positive because I remember when I was working in the UK, how unthinkable it was to go on a strike. Like I used to live in France too, and the French were always striking. And instead, I never seen a strike in the UK. 5 years I was there, I never saw one. And now suddenly everybody's striking, and maybe they really, they have put up with too much. They've had enough, and they're finally starting to take a stance against it. So on one hand, it means the situation must really be bad, so that's not good. But at the same time, I hope that that's the sign of things changing.
Yeah, this movement even is called Enough is Enough.
Yeah,
And I think that means, sorry for a play word here, that they really have enough. So
yeah.
yeah, it is something is waking up in the British society, and let's hope it's for the good.
Mm.
But also at the same time, look what's government is doing. They want to change laws to ban strikes, to make
Oh yeah, yeah.
companies able to force people to work, and they trying to ban protests. I don't know if you've seen a couple of days back, there was a guy holding a blank piece of paper
Hmm.
during some visit of the king or some minor royals, and he was led away by the police. This is
Fuck.
already like a Russia standards of democratic expressions. If you cannot even stand in silence with empty piece of paper,
Yeah.
so on one side, Britain is going on the like societal level is going in a good direction, but on the other side is not. And I think we need to refer our listeners back to the chapter 3 of this podcast, if Britain is really a democracy,
Mm.
because I'm afraid that may be an obstruction to fix this country as well. So
Yeah.
well, I keep fingers crossed for Britons, because it is great country and it
Yeah.
deserves to be able to provide a good
Yeah.
living environment to its citizens and everyone who lives there, as we
Yeah.
used to
It
for many
deserves
years.
it deserves better. The British people deserve better. And to be honest, in the future, not right away, but in the future, I mean I miss Cambridge. I miss several things about the UK, and I wouldn't mind going back there to live, but not under the current conditions. Not as long as things are like this. Things need to change.
Yeah, I'm the same. I love Scotland. I love Scottish people, but I can't imagine me going back to live there with the things that are like they are at the moment.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm with you. So anyway, thank you, Adam, for being with us today.
And for letting
And
us insult your country.
You didn't do so badly. I could probably say worse things.
Okay.
thank you to our listeners for staying with us for 10 chapters. And we will be back. I don't know, maybe, but I hope we'll be able to get back one day as a podcast entitled You Are Great Again, Britain.
That would be amazing.
I hope this will happen sooner than later.
Well, it was nice sharing this journey with you. And yeah, we will see what the future brings.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
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 This podcast was presented to you by Elisa and Tomasz. Edited by me, Tomasz Oryński. The song Rule Britannia, recorded on Edison's cylinder, is now in public domain. Guitars Artur Lesicki. The logo of the podcast was designed by Michał Wrona. Additional voice in the jingle, Maciej Przybycień. If you want to follow more of the things we do, you can find me, Tomasz Oryński, on Twitter at toryński. You can also look up my website, oryński.eu, and you can also listen to my other podcast, Lewackie Pitolenie, which is mostly in Polish, but some of the chapters are also available in English. Meanwhile, thank you for listening. It was a privilege to be able to talk to you.